morning. I'm hanging out here with Tim Eldred, and tell us a little bit about you. If we don't know you, tell us who you are, a little bit of your story.
Well, I serve as first of all, I'm a husband. I always want to begin that because I always do what most of us do. I end up introduce myself by my title or my job, and that's not my identity, you know? So I'm a husband.
We could just do a whole idea lab on that one right here.
We could. This is like withdrawal transition steps,
right.
and a father of two. And I direct Christian Endeavor International, which is a 132-year-old. It's really considered by most of us to be the father of or forerunner to youth ministry, and our legacy of Christian Endeavor is really all the beauty of this. So
that's great. And you're talking a lot about the idea of student ownership in your ministry. So tell us what that means. Unpack that for us a little bit.
Yeah, it's you know, as we travel, as we hang with amazing youth workers and find out what their greatest need is, and we really kind of see what God is doing, we're finding more and more need to give students ownership of ministry, but we're struggling on the how-to of that. We may not have seen that modeled recently in the last couple of decades. We've got great things that are coming out of youth ministry, but student ownership, I mean, isn't that ownership of what? Are we talking ownership of the program, ownership of our program, ownership of whose ministry are we talking about? And so we're talking about students' ownership of their ministry. Which
is different than like giving them a piece of it. We're saying the whole thing.
Yeah, student ownership is not student delegation. So like, hey, this is on my to-do list this week as the youth worker, the youth pastor, and I want to give some of my job away, and which is not our job. Our job is not to do ministry for young people, it's to do ministry with young people, and more specifically, it's to help young people do their ministry, not do or delegate my ministry to them.
And do you think students need to be at a certain place spiritually before ownership takes place, or is it like ownership is what takes them in that spiritual journey?
I actually think I do. I think it's ownership that begins to develop their faith. I mean, let's just take the disciples. 11 of the 12 disciples, we are confident historically, rabbinically, culturally, were under the age of 20. Okay? No one really disputes that. So let's take James and John, the young twins who probably were followed around by their mother, you know? And what kind of spiritual maturity do they have? But if we look at our own lives and begin to say, when did someone give you a chance to make a mistake, make a mess, risk failure? Those are memorable first times that begin part of your spiritual formation and growth. So it's like a kite. I let string out a little bit at a time, and the more that kite demonstrates the ability to fly, the more straight kite string I can let out. But I can't wait until it's fully mature, or when it's fully mature, it's fully gone. It's left the faith. It's walked away.
That's interesting. But so that also requires you as the youth worker to be willing to engage and rebuke. Yeah. Because the disciples, when they did blow it, there was conversation happening, there was rebuke happening, and then another chance given. You have to be able to have that conversation with a student.
Well, not only a student, you've got to create a culture within your church where it's okay through relationship to have the trust of the people you serve or the parents of the children you're serving in order to be able to have earned the right to do that, you know, and we don't. That might be a skill we need to work on, how to do that. But Jesus did that. He sends the 12 out, they come back, he goes, seriously, we've went over this before in Sunday school class, sit down.
Right.
But then he didn't take over and say, I'll do it myself. He sent them out again to risk failure.
Right.
Which is beautiful, is it's a serious part of his ministry that we may have ignored.
Do you think we have our own, I mean, this is like, let's get really deep. Let's have a little therapy right now. Like, do you think there's a part of us, like, if I give it away and they fail, then I fail?
Oh, absolutely, because our identity is in our job title. Our identity is in our performance. Our pay is based upon our performance. Our evaluation is based upon our attendance. And so if they go and they fail, and I mean, failure is going to happen if you did not prepare them. I mean, the only thing young people cannot do in your ministry is the only thing we are too lazy to train them to do. There's nothing in my job that a student can't learn to do if I will quit thinking that I have to do that. It's
Right.
important that I do that. And if I don't do that, the board's going to say, what do you pay me for? You pay me to bring out the flavors of young people and help them develop and discover
Right.
and deploy a God mission for their life. I
Right.
can't do that for them if I'm doing it all.
Right. Okay, so I'm a youth pastor, so I have tons of questions for you, but I know you also have some things you want to tell us that you prepared for us. So do you want to walk us through some slides?
I've got pictures of my family. No, I don't.
Oh, okay. That'd be great.
I just want to talk about this whole issue of, just for a minute, we have to begin in Genesis for youth ministry. And it's really simple, but for me, it's the core of everything that I teach or write about, is the whole idea of Genesis 2:18. God says, it is not good for man to be alone. We read that at every wedding we go to. It's not just a marital statement. Mm-hmm. It's a statement of identity, being, belonging, and it doesn't even make sense when you think it in context, because it's God and Adam says, God says, Adam, everything I've created is good except this, you and I sitting on stools, neither this is not good because you're alone. And Adam says, well, that's just bad math because 1 + 1 = 1 in this situation, right? And so my theology is real simple, that God basically tells us that alone sucks, okay? That's what I think Genesis 2:18 boils down to. I'd like to make shirts, but all my Baptist friends wouldn't wear them. So alone sucks. Now, just from a practical standpoint, I mean, you guys can think about this in your own ministries. How much time do we spend in isolation, in an office, at Starbucks, behind my laptop, doing ministry, creating information, preparing to present, polish a program or an event for young people, and we do it completely alone? Knowing that alone sucks and relationships change lives, but my job is to spend 75% of my time sitting in a really fun, posh office, preparing to be with kids who just really could care less if my PowerPoint is pretty and all this technology we're talking about is really cool. But what they want to do is a chance to let me do it, let me make a mess, do something in life with me. So if you are not spending time with students, I mean, God came down, He sent us Jesus, He did life with us, He walked with us, God with us, lives are changed through with. If alone sucks and Jesus came and didn't send a memo so that He walked with and did life with His disciples, how far away are we from the biblical model of discipleship and calling it youth ministry when Jesus clearly gave His disciples ownership, if you read the Gospels, just a little differently?
Well, and if you're not with your students, you really don't know what they're capable of or what part they could own or how they could own it. Like, you just have no context of relationship with or what they're capable of.
Well, and the first pushback to that usually is, do you have how many kids I have? There's no way I can be with all my kids. Well, then I would challenge the thought that your ministry is not to be with kids. I know you think you were hired to be with kids, but on the list of influences in a kid's life, you're number 20. There are 19 more things, including every electronic device in their pocket, that's more influential in their life than we want to think that we are. Because on the average year, you're going to get 40 hours a year with a student. 40 hours. What are you going to do in 40 hours a year with a student? Your job is not to spend time with students, it's to spend time with people and equip them to spend time with students and duplicate yourself. But you can't do that because you're sitting in an office making something pretty and polished alone, and alone sucks. So we are completely missing the point of Genesis. And so we've got to move on to this whole idea that if we have relationship change in lives and relationship, I mean, God gave us relationship. My favorite part of Genesis is this, Neely. God said it's not good for man to be alone, and so God gave man a partner, and together they were to conceive and create us, repopulate. God doesn't do much differently today, even in youth work, than He did in the garden, because when we're talking about giving students ownership, ownership has to begin with conception. This is my picture of conception, or it should be my picture. There it is. That's my picture of conception, okay? Now, in this picture, youth workers...
Just to clarify, everybody, you wanted the giggles because there's a sperm on the screen. So
there's sperm on the screen. Quite often you don't go to church and someone puts a graphic of sperm on this screen. It's really, for most of us as youth workers, it's a selfie. Are you listening to me?
I felt like that just got uncomfortable.
A selfie.
We're sperm?
As we build relationships with students, you're sperm. We build relationships with students, or adults in our church build relationships with students, and we find out what's on their heart, what's fertile, what has God placed within their 13, 14, 15-year-old heart or mind, our job is not to say, here's what we're going to do, and here's what we should do, and here's what we're going to teach, and here's where our service project is, and this is where we're going on a mission trip. Our job is to say, what breaks your heart? What's on your heart? What has God placed within you that's fertile and exciting? And you come along as a youth worker, and you don't say, here's what we're going to do. We say, Neely, I love your heart. How can I come alongside of you and nurture and fertilize and bring out what God's put in you and give you ownership of your ministry, and then come alongside of that and help you do your ministry and quit doing ministry for you?
That's so good. Really good, Tim. Thanks for challenging us. Thanks for pushing us to think outside of the box as far as what ministry is and what student ownership is. I think we think we're doing it a lot, but really digging in deeper to a deeper level.
We're all relearning right now.
Yeah.
I mean, God's doing something amazing. We're all relearning. And I think we can take some of these ideas and create some best practices and begin sharing with each other and grow together in youth work. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And thanks, you guys, for joining us in the Idea Lab.